Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society. We are grateful to gather on this beautiful morning, both in person and online, for a time of inspiration, reflection, and connection. Whether you join us today with joy in your heart, weighted with burdens, or searching for meaningful connections, we are glad that you are here. I'm the Reverend Diana Smith, the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a somewhat tall white woman in my mid-40s with short, curly white and brown hair, blue and green glasses, a blue dress with soaring birds, and a stole with hands of many colors on it, standing in UUS's pulpit at the front of our sanctuary, which is filling gradually with people of many ages. Come on in, y'all. Through the window walls of our sanctuary, we connect with the natural world around us, where it is a sparkling spring day. What has May brought us, hey? Goodness gracious. As we gather, we give thanks for this land and all who have cared for it over the centuries, particularly the Kickapoo, the Iowa, the Sauk and Meskwaki, and the Oceti-Sakowin nations. As people of many ages, genders, races, sexual orientations, classes, abilities, and health statuses, we know how important it is to come together to create a radically welcoming spiritual community. As Unitarian Universalists, our faith expresses our core value of love through how we agree to be together and to support each other. We're guided by the shared principles, sources, and values of our living religious tradition. And this morning, as part of our exploration of Unitarian Universalism's proposed values, we will be celebrating our value of pluralism, as well as exploring the practices, challenges, and gifts of pluralism and of peace. If you're newer to our congregation, we invite you to learn more about us after the service. If you're here in person, you can talk to a greeter in the atrium or anyone during Lunch and Learn. For those online, there's a link to a visitor form in the YouTube show notes that will let us connect with you. And now I share the words of Tess Bomberger, who writes, "This place would be less beautiful without you, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Jew, Hindu, humanist, and earth-centered too. This place would be less beautiful without you. Your heart honed by hardship, grief, illness, seeking solace and comfort here among us. This place would be less beautiful without you, filled with joy and gratitude, seeking celebration of life's bounty. This place would be less beautiful without you, curious, inquisitive, asking questions, seeking transformations, emerging from within. This place would be less beautiful without you, striving to resist a world that tells us we are so much less than we can truly be. This place would be less beautiful without each of us, born here in this morning to seek heaven's fire in each other's souls, our own flames rising to meet." And so, let's rise in body or in spirit and join our voices in singing hymn number 112, "Do You Hear?" The words will be on the screens.
In the Good morning. I'm Kara Beauchamp, a member of UUS and a worship associate. I'm a white woman in my late 50s with white hair. My pronouns are she and her. As Unitarian Universalists, we light a flame within a chalice as a symbol of sanctuary and safety, to unite us in our worship and to remind us of our ongoing search for the light of truth. Please join me in saying our chalice lighting words as Chrissy lights our chalice. We gather in community to celebrate the wonder and mystery of this great gift. So let us now kindle. Please join me. Let us now kindle the flame of our liberal religious heritage and renew our covenant of mutual love and care. I guess that was just me, sorry. Now you can join me more. Love is our doctrine, the quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to serve those in need. This we promise, this we covenant with life and one another. Each week, we light a candle for justice and healing to acknowledge our interdependence with the natural world and with all members of the global community, especially the most vulnerable. We light this candle so that we may not be numbed to injustice and trauma, but rather find strength, courage, and love as we work in solidarity with others for liberation, justice, and healing. Together, we create resilience and hope. Today, as we light this candle, we acknowledge the Buddha's birthday, which is celebrated in Asian countries and around the world. Buddha's birthday is determined on a lunar calendar and is usually celebrated in May. This year, it's on May 15th. The celebration includes the ritual bathing of statues of Buddha, and it reminds people to clean one's own mind of negative emotions, which prevent us from seeing reality as it really is. As I light this candle, let's hold a time of silence to listen to our hearts and bodies, or perhaps to lift up prayers.
Good morning. I love that. My name is Nick Kaplan. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Grateful Director of Lifespan Religious Education here at UUS. This morning, I have a friend up here to help me talk to you all. Many of you have met this lovely creature. Anybody remember their name? Jet Pig. Jet Pig is in UU churches and fellowships all over right now, helping people learn about Article 2. Because what does that mean? Well, we use the name Jet Pig to help us remember exactly what that means. It talks about all of these different values that we as Unitarian Universalists uphold with something at the center. Love, yeah. So that's why there's a heart on Jet Pig's backpack. And this month, we're using the P in Jet Pig to learn about pluralism. This Jet Pig with this silver backpack has all these nifty little cards in it. They've got an image and the word that represents the different values. There's one in here that introduces JETPIG and all the values. And this JETPIG is meant to go home with different families, different congregants on a regular basis so that they can practice our different values with JETPIG. So this month we're talking about pluralism. What in the world does that mean? No, really, what does it mean? Multiple things, thank you. So pluralism means multiple things. The way that it's worded here, and in the way that Unitarian Universalists have decided that we would like to word it is, we celebrate that all sacred beings I missed a word that would have been confusing. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We can agree on that, right? We're different. We believe different things. We like different things. Awesome. We can agree on that. It's this next part that I need more help with. This next part says, we covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. So we covenant. That means we're agreeing to this, right? Yes. So we agree that this is something that we need to do to be together in beloved community. But where's the how? The how isn't on this little card. So I want some help from you all. How do we learn from one another? How do we continue in this space and in our community to search for truth and meaning? How are we embracing our differences? So let's go back to that first one. How are we learning from one another?
By listening and giving others attention.
That's awesome. So I'll repeat that help me if I say it wrong, by listening and giving others attention and love. That was it, right? So listening, you all are actively doing that right now. I can see that you're listening to me by the way that you're engaging, by the way that you're answering questions. So you come into this space to listen. How else do we learn from one another? Yeah, how else do we listen and learn? Okay, so we make sure that others are saying the right thing, so we might support someone if they get something wrong sometimes. Yeah, and we do that here, and we do that where else? There? What's over there? Religious education, RE, our classrooms. Do we do any listening and learning that direction in our fellowship hall? Yes. Yes, so we come together, hopefully we're talking to new people. Hopefully we don't just talk to the people we came with each week, right? We want to learn from each other. That means we need to be in community together, right? We might step outside these doors or move outside these spaces and continue to learn from each other, right? So we have to listen. Yeah, and we have to keep searching for truth and meaning, right? We acknowledge that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. So we have to listen to each other to learn about and celebrate those differences, right? Yeah, love this enthusiasm up here. We have to listen to each other to be able to celebrate our differences and our commonalities, right? There we go. Thank Thank you. Yeah, so we have to. We can learn, adults can learn from children, children can learn from adults, we can learn together, all sorts of different things, right? And that's true, young and old can teach. And we are going to celebrate that because we are so different, and we love that about us, and we want to continue to learn about each other. If you ever want to take JetPig home with you to practice doing our different values, just let me know. And JetPig loves to go on field trips to visit different people. So, right now though, some of us are going to move into a different space to listen and learn. In a moment, I'm going to invite my friend Maria up to light the lantern and guide any children, youth, or teachers off to religious education. But I wanted to let you know there's something special about one of our classrooms today. Our Bluey classroom today is learning about friendship. And so we'll watch the episode Barky Boats, but then we'll go outside. So you'll get to hear all about it in class. But so the Bluey classroom will be going outside today. Parents and caregivers, if that is an issue, please join us as we head that direction and let me know. Because the other classroom, the Lego classroom, is not going outside. They've got a different lesson to learn about. JetPig's gonna hang out up here to remind us. And then Maria, can I have you come forward? And Xinglai will play the song for us. And if you know the song, please join in singing it. Isn't that after we send children to Ari?
No, it's going to be. It's okay. Okay, we'll do.
Yes. Thank you all for helping with that song. Our congregation is made up of many people and of many communities. We gather in many ways to learn, sing, laugh, share meals, try new things, and help repair our beautiful, broken world. Together, we create a community that nurtures us as we seek to live love more fully and fiercely into this world. This morning, Jan Weaver is here to share about how connecting with UUS through religious education has impacted her.
Good morning. Good job. My pronouns are she and her. I am a 70-year-old white woman. I am 5'4" with short white hair and glasses. I'm wearing a white shirt and a blue cardigan. I moved to Iowa 2 years ago and joined this congregation last spring. In Columbia, Missouri, where I'm from, I was a UU for over 35 years. Like most parents of young kids, I volunteered in Sunday school about once a month, served on the RE committee, and organized holiday events. But once our kids were grown, I drifted away from RE and got more involved with adult-oriented activities like membership committee, Green Sanctuary, and the board. Moving to Iowa meant starting a lot of things over again, including church, and I realized that I wanted to do RE again. Here is why I think I made that decision. I like to learn. I learn more from things and people that are different from me or my experiences. In this congregation, the group of people most different from me are the kids. It is not just that they are so much younger, with all that holds, it is also that they are growing up in a different world than I did. Here are some things I'm learning. To give them time to gather their thoughts when they want to speak. To listen carefully to what they are saying instead of starting to formulate a response before they finish. I'm still working on that. To understand that disappointment feels the same for everyone, whether it is sticky lizards that do not stick as advertised, or the outcome of an election. I also think the kids may be learning from me. They don't interact very often with people who are so much older. I am like, but not exactly like their grown-ups. Yet, I can show I also care about them. I can model kindness and curiosity and openness to joy and show that it can be a lifelong practice. Kindness, curiosity, and openness to joy were gifts given to me as a child over 60 years ago by my parents, but also by adults whose names and faces are lost to me. I honor them by trying to pass these on to the kids I work with. And maybe when those kids are as old as I am now, they will feel the pull to do the same with the children in their charge and care. That is why I think I volunteer with RE. Thank you.
I will be reading There's My Temple by Reverend Maria Teresa Gustillo Gallardo. The Reverend Gallardo has been the president of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines since 2019. She is the first out lesbian and trans president in the church's history. As a student leader in Manila in the post-Marcos years, she advocated for migrant workers, for labor and land reforms, and for laws to reduce violence against women and children. As president, she concentrates on the ministry of the church and on climate change. Here is There's My Temple by Reverend Tet. There's my temple. Believer, unbeliever, or wild one, you are welcome. We have no definition of who we are, but human. We have no code, but that of respect. We have no creed, but that of equality. There's my temple. Identity seeker, sinner, stateless or not, you are welcome. We have no constraints on expression, but space. We have no code, but to listen to poetry between the silence and the surrender. There's my temple, nature tripper, urban dweller, or saint. You are welcome. How shall we divide the world but by our breaths? We have no pope above us, no infallible bull. We have no judgment, but in terms of harm. There's my temple, history maker, marginalized, unorganized. You are welcome. We have no covenant among us, but mutual assistance. We insist on no assumptions and doubt moral facts. We are free to theorize with emotion and call it hope. There's my temple, unbecoming, expert, robe, or disrobe. You are welcome. We have no dwarfs or giants. Goliath fell long ago. We have no seal on revelation. Tentative is truth. Lead by your desires and serve by your power. There's my temple. Funny, temperamental, shy, or wise. You are welcome. There is not one way of being human, not even Superman. We have no world but that which we create together. There is as much wisdom in harmony as in dissent. Nurturing gratitude and how we understand and express interdependence is part of how we live into our Unitarian Universalist faith. As we enter our time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer, we acknowledge the joys and sorrows of our congregation. We do this by dropping stones into a bowl of water, symbolically immersing our personal joys and sorrows into the flow of all life's joys and sorrows. The water surrounds and holds the stone, just as we are surrounded and held by the love and support of this congregation. During joys and sorrows, we often sing together as a way to hold each other in the journey of life, just as the water embraces the stones. Today, as we move deeper into reflecting on the practices and promises of pluralism and peace, we'll be joining our voices together in meditation on breathing. Sarah Dan Jones wrote this piece when she was walking around New York City in the aftermath of September 11th. She was filled with despair and needed to channel that into some hope. And this song emerged. So if you are in the sanctuary, let's join our voices. While we sing, if you feel called to do so, please come forward, take a stone from the basket, and place your stone in the water as we sing together. And if you're participating in our service elsewhere, you may wish to meditatively hold a stone, wash your hands, or meditate on an object near you.
I invite you into a spirit of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. Spirit of life, Spirit of love. We come here today grateful to have found our temple, a place that has different people, we can join our hearts and minds and spirits and not be so alone. And yet, we come here. We come to this temple created by all of us, with so many cares, wondering and worrying about protests, how we should engage, what we should support. Anxious about politics and strife, worried about leaders around the world, anxious for the changing climate, and even with all these large cares, caring too our friends, our family, ourselves, through the strange diagnosis, the progression of illness, depression, addiction, and change. In these times, we come together, carrying all these things, seeking a place of easing, a place of connecting. In this time together, in this time we share, may we find that easing. May we find that deepening. May we know ourselves connected to the cycle, to the story of life, of love. And may we move into creating and deepening it in new yet old ways. So may it be. Amen. Blessed, blessed be.
The authors of Mistakes and Miracles, Karen Lynn and the Reverend Nancy Palmer Jones, describe themselves as lay leader and settled minister, Asian American and white European American, younger and older, scientist engineer and artist writer. They explain that their book invites you into the stories of people and congregations that are on the road to creating multicultural, anti-racist, beloved community, and that they have included mistakes and failures, as well as breakthroughs and successes, because these stories, to be useful, must be real. Here is an excerpt from Mistakes and Miracles. What is it in Unitarian Universalism's core message that demands that its people work toward building multicultural, anti-racist, beloved community? What in Unitarian Universalism's central theology requires us to do this work if we want to call ourselves Unitarian Universalists? How can we articulate this call of our faith in compelling ways? These questions have troubled and consumed us since long before we began writing of this book. The Unitarian Universalism is famously non-creedal. which means there is no belief test for claiming a Unitarian Universalist identity. Our fourth principle expresses our community's commitment to affirming and promoting a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. In fact, most Unitarian Universalists agree on the value of the search more than we do on any particular outcome. The degree of freedom of conscience and belief promised to individual UUs remains a distinguishing characteristic of the faith. For some, it is the main draw. Is it even possible, then, to claim that Unitarian Universalist theology requires us to build multicultural, anti-racist, beloved community? And if so, where and how is this core requirement expressed? As we wrestle with the question of why we must do the work of multiculturalism and anti-racism, we invite you to wrestle with us. In one of our many heartfelt conversations with the Reverend Abi Janamanchi, he uses a story from the Hebrew Scriptures to capture the mix of holiness and messiness that striving for multicultural, anti-racist, beloved community will always bring. In the story of Jacob wrestling with a stranger through the night, Jacob has, as Reverend Abi says, a wounding experience. It is not a fun experience. We passionate champions for beloved community mustn't expect this work to be fun. Then Abi continues the story. Jacob prevails, but he doesn't win. He's wounded in the process. And the stranger blesses him and renames him Israel, which means the one who has striven with God. That's a powerful metaphor for what we are called to be in this world as Unitarian Universalists. It calls for us to be open to the spiritual discomfort of engaging with the other, to be present in that way, and to know that we will come out of that experience transformed and even renamed. Part of our spiritual task is to develop the spiritual muscle, to be present to that discomfort and pain. This is where I think we have growing up to do. Being by nature conflict averse, we want quickly to move to the resolution phase, where we can just be renamed and carry on. Abi laughs at the familiarity of this longing for the quick fix, the easy redemption. But to obtain the blessing of pluralism, we Unitarian Universalists must risk the wounding and the pain. We must welcome proximity to the unknown. If we do, we will emerge transformed, recipients of new life, which is what Jacob's renaming represents. We feel the power of this story. We have experienced it ourselves in the wrestling, in the blessing, and the new life of this journey, mistakes and miracles indeed. And now the journey continues. How we give, what we do with our lives, our time, and our resources is a reflection of our values. In response to the abundance we are blessed with, every week, this congregation donates generously to organizations in the community whose work aligns with our values and principles. Our community partner agency this month is the Free Lunch Program. The cornerstone of the Free Lunch Program is an open door, a full plate, and no questions asked. A hot meal is served 6 days a week at 1105 South Gilbert Court in Iowa City. Since 1986, UUS has provided the free lunch meal on the second Friday of every month to about 110 guests. The UUS group welcomes new volunteers, and more information can be found in the May newsletter. In the sanctuary, ushers will collect the offering, or you can follow the instructions on the screen for how to give online. All cash contributions go directly to our community partner agency. You may also contribute by check using the memo line to designate the purpose. In addition to assisting our community partner, you may also contribute towards your pledge to our society or contribute to the congregation to provide additional support for our operating expenses. The offering is a sign of commitment to this free congregation, which is completely supported by the generosity of all who join with us. As we give and receive this offering, may we be transformed by our giving, and may the world be transformed by our gifts.
So many of you who've been around for a while know that I am a bit of a fan of sci-fi. Recently, I've been rewatching old episodes of Star Trek Voyager. All right, good. I'm glad. I've got some connections out here. So in the series, the crew of the Starship Voyager has gotten lost far from home in the 24th century, right? Now, the other day, I was watching an episode where, to make a long, complicated story short, essentially, the Voyager crew got caught in a recreation of a 1930s movie that a member of the Starship crew, Tom Paris, had been playing. Now, while trying to explain what's going on in the movie to Captain Janeway, she says to him incredulously, "This is how you've been spending your free time?" Well, now Tom tells Captain Janeway that he's been studying how past cultures viewed the future, and it hasn't turned out as black and white or as clear-cut as we, thought it would be. And really, in the Star Trek universe, that is very, very true, because as many of you know, Earth is part of the United Federation of Planets that's made up of many, many species. What's more, the crew of Voyager, like the crews of the Enterprise ships, is constantly encountering and engaging with numerous other species, right? And one of the things that I, like many other fans, love is watching how the crew engages with those cultures, makes sense of them, and figures out how to navigate the ethical and scientific dilemmas that those species confront them with. Captain Janeway, who is one of my favorite captains, demonstrates a lot of moral humility when determining how to interact with other species. And in doing so, she gets us to think a lot about how we engage with pluralism. Not only the pluralism of the Federation, but the pluralism that we encounter in our world today. That is the beauty of sci-fi, after all, isn't it? Which is, of course, also the value that we're exploring today, pluralism. And the proposed new Unitarian Universalist values, which UUs around the country will be voting on in June, it says, pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Now, for those of us in our present society, we're usually not confronted with the situations that are quite as wild as the ones that the Starship Voyager crew encounter. After all, we don't often beam down onto planets only to find that the culture there has criminalized violent thought, or find that a centuries-old weapon of mass destruction powered by a sentient artificial intelligence has taken over our ship, thank goodness. But we are often confronted with the question of how to respond to our value of pluralism. Because while most of us feel the inherent truth and value of this value, we love celebrating diversity of culture, experience, and theology, and deeply appreciate how much we learn from one another, we often find ourselves coming up against the question of how to live with pluralism. Because all of us who live in community know that while differences of identity, experience, behavior, and belief are sources of strength, they're also a source of friction, of tension, right? Yeah. We witness this vividly in our lives, in the political divides of our community and our country, and many of us find ourselves wondering how to navigate them. Luckily for us, earlier this year, from January through April, the Hidden Brain podcast released a series of 5 episodes about navigating our polarized politics, what goes on in our hearts and minds, and inhibits our abilities to navigate pluralism smoothly in ways that can enhance or even simply keep open lines of communication, and what we can do to have a bit more success. The episodes touch on everything from our current politics to complex peace-building processes. One of my favorite stories in the series comes from when Shankar Vedantam interviews psychologist Peter Coleman of Columbia University. Early in the episode, Coleman tells the story of a fight he had with his roommates when he was about 20. Anybody here have fights with roommates when they were about 20? Okay. Few people, I'm not alone. Now, as this fight that Peter was having was unraveling, he was given an assignment in his social psychology class. First, he was asked to write about a dispute he'd had with someone else from his own perspective with as much detail as he could. According to Coleman, he really got into this assignment. He had at it and felt quite aggrieved as he wrote about the perfidy of his roommates. But then, after that first essay, he was told to write about the same conflict from the other person's perspective, writing in the first person and really putting himself in their place. In the episode, Coleman discusses how transformative this early experience was for him in beginning to understand and deciding to study how we can bridge political divides and engage across deep differences. In that episode, as well as others in the series, Peter Coleman and his colleagues, Kurt Gray, Rob Willer, Yana Krupnikov, Julia Minson, and Steve Inskeep, share with us a few stories and lessons about how we can bridge differences. Now, many of the lessons make a lot of sense. They were some of the things that we started to hear when Nick was working with us earlier. There are things like developing and showing respect for another person, building rapport so that the conversation is based on something deeper, having a willingness to engage with another party, seeing the humanity of each other, having moral empathy, which means that we understand that people whose political worldviews are morally rooted have the hardest time connecting with others. We find it easy to experience contempt for people on the other side of a political divide and bring lots of baggage into a debate. Moral empathy means focusing on what's inside others' hearts and minds, and morally reframing what we're talking about to what's important to another person. Another one of the things that comes up through these conversations in the Hidden Brain is the idea of moral humility. That is emotionally accepting that the feelings of people who think differently than us are legitimate. That can be a hard one. We see these showing up in our lives. We also see them showing up through stories like Star Trek Voyager, which allows us to witness, in a less threatening environment, the challenges of having moral humility and the gifts that can come with experiencing it. Both our episodes, both our scientists and Hidden Brain and our sci-fi here, can help us start to understand the difference between learning to do something differently and actually doing something differently. Because one of the cruxes here is not just understanding these lessons, but figuring out how to apply them, right? In Hidden Brain, Peter Coleman, the man I was talking about earlier, talks about an experience that he had with a neighbor that many of us can probably identify with. He found that this neighbor had vastly different political views than he did. And even though this is his work, to talk with people about how, and to work with people on bridging political divides, what do you think he did? If you're guessing that he disengaged from his neighbor, you're right. Because that's what most of us do, right? But then through this long journey, he decided to start talking with his neighbor. And as he discusses this, he and the other folks in these Hidden Brain series share with us that given the complexity of our current conditions, of the current divides, just putting people together to talk doesn't always work to bridge divides, and it can even push people further apart. This is because we have developed in our culture such a distrust of authority, a practice of being aggrieved, of jumping there and using a grievance as a source of power. We've developed an unwillingness to engage, to stay in the conversation with others, to listen, to compromise. And yet, these things, staying in our conversation, are one of the most crucial things that we can do when we're engaging with pluralism. This is challenging in the wider world, but also within our religious communities, where it's part of what our covenant asks us to do. But I'll come back to that later. As part of this is also being willing to change our minds, accept new perspectives and new ways of understanding things, and how different people's different experiences affect the conclusions they come to, and what moral language is important to them. We also learn through these experiences that one of the crucial things about pluralism is not giving up the idea of humanity, of inherent worthiness and dignity, but there's the willingness to reflect on, discuss, and be moved on how to get there. There's a willingness to be wrong that comes into our understanding of and our ability to engage with pluralism. Now, these things are challenging in a political realm, but they're also challenging within our congregations, which is perhaps part of why it's so important to articulate our value of pluralism. This helps us begin to delve into the practices that enhance pluralism and peace in our evolving religious tradition, as well as in the wider world. I'm going to go back to the way that pluralism is framed in the proposed language for Article 2. It says, "We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect." Psychologist Mick Cooper writes, "Pluralism is a spirit of welcoming warmth and care to the other. It's a willingness to engage in dialogue. It's an openness to being wrong and to learning. Pluralism says, how I see things is one way of seeing the world, and I want to value and learn from others." He continues, "Pluralism isn't easy. It's a constant willingness to self-challenge and look to where we might be wrong or limited, even with regard to pluralism itself. It requires a capacity to detach ourselves from our agendas, our beliefs, our commitments, and to recognize that there may be other ways. And it also requires us to recognize that we can never wholly achieve that. In other words, pluralism asks us to recognize that there are other perspectives, experiences, and priorities, both from people who are more marginalized and more privileged, and from people who with deeply held theologies and worldviews that are quite different from our own, both within and outside of our congregations. And I'd like to invite us to hold the many parts of this. One of them is that the practice of pluralism means that we'll encounter and engage with deeply held theologies and worldviews, often ones that have emerged from significant life experiences and deep reflection within as well as outside of our congregations. There's also a piece of this that means that there are other legitimate perspectives, experiences, and priorities for the work that we're doing together, coming from people who are good and loving within our communities and our congregations. And part of this is that we are encountering these both from people who are more marginalized and who are more privileged. And the tools that we use to listen and understand how we stretch ourselves may be different in different situations. Friction or challenge can come up as a result of all of these. And guess what? They're also an invitation to spiritual and psychological growth. The challenge of this can make it tempting to disengage from the process of pluralism. But if we do so, we lose those opportunities for growth, as well as the richness that we get from diversity, from learning from each other. I'm going to share with you a short story that's adapted from a story that Rumi told about the elephant, the candle, and the eye of the sea. He wrote, "Some people took an elephant into a dark house to exhibit. People went in to find out what it was like, but since it was too dark for them to see anything clearly, they had to feel the elephant with their hands." Now you might imagine this in your minds, right? You go into a room, you can't see what's in there, and you feel part of it. One person touched its trunk and said, "This animal is like a water pipe." Another touched its large ear and said it seemed like a fan. Another touched its leg and declared, "The elephant is like a pillar." Another touched its back and proclaimed, "The elephant is like a throne." Now, each time anyone touched the elephant, they would understand it through the particular part that they touched. People's experiences of it differed. Now, if each of them had held out a candle in the dark, all the differences between what they said would have vanished. At the same time, in the absence of that light, when we share our different experiences, we can come to new understandings and deeper understandings. Given our limited understandings, those different versions of what the elephant is like help us understand more of its totality. What's more, we often need even more the perspectives that aren't often part of or historically haven't been heard as much. Sensei Angel Kyoto Williams shares inclusivity, which is part of pluralism, is not how do we make you part of what we are, but how do we become more a part of what you are. We have to get clear that an essential aspect of our practice is to shift these things internally for ourselves, because our personal liberation, the very things we come to Dharma for, is completely bound up in making these kinds of changes. In other words, the practice of pluralism invites us into the discernment of engaging with the gifts and challenges that come from different theologies, of trying to understand what would be meaningful for someone about a different theology, or what a different experience of the world means because of race, gender, or sexual orientation, or disability. Engaging with the practice of pluralism can help us address the moral injury that we experience from being taught the myth of superiority, that we are not interconnected and interdependent, that we can function without pluralism and must cut off or disconnect parts of ourselves, our communities, or our connection with the earth in order to belong. Now, I know while all this sounds really interesting, we can't always leap directly into moral empathy because our experiences of the world are so different. And this is one of the places that listening comes in. It helps us build respect, rapport, and humility. Because part of the peril of pluralism is telling ourselves that the many different stories are just different ideas. In pluralism, there's a piece of this that is about listening to the other. There's also a piece of pluralism we know that is about understanding that there are certain things that we hold to. As we engage in pluralism, one of the dangers of that is moving into the idea that white supremacy, that transphobia are just different ideas. And so how do we hold that together, that peril of pluralism, of moving too far, with the idea of continuing to listen? Listening doesn't mean that we have to give up our values. It does mean staying in the conversation. It also means leaning into accountability and repair. It means navigating change and the challenges and gifts of compromise, of listening, of learning deeply, honoring others. And when we lean into this work, we can start to experience joy in others getting their needs met. We can experience being in a place of growing and changing. Because, as Angel Kyoto Williams shared, these are the very things that we come to Dharma, to the path for. Or as Reverend Abhi Janamanchi shared, the holiness and messiness of this work is that it has the power to transform and even rename us. That this is about striving with ourselves, with God, with the spirit of love and life in ways that build our spiritual muscles. We know that that's not an easy path, it's not an easy process. And yet, the path, the process, the practice, that's the gift. It's the gift that gives us the ability to grow our ability to be present and share our presence with others. It's a gift that lets us experience joy in others getting their needs met. And it's a gift that invites us into a place of growing and changing. So may it be. Amen. Blessed, blessed be.
May what has been shared today help us more fully affirm our interconnection and live into love and justice. Immediately after the service, we gather in Fellowship Hall or outside for conversation and community. Today will be our final lunch and learn for the spring. Lunch will be served immediately after the service. Then at 11:45, we'll invite people to head towards the labyrinth for the dedication of our peace pole, after which Virginia Melroy will be leading an introduction to using the labyrinth for grounding and spiritual growth. And now to close our service today, we will sing hymn number 1023. Please rise in body and spirit as you are able.
Once more. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all
Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. All these we carry in our hearts and in our minds until we are together again.
As you go out into the world this day and this week, may you go embracing our differences and our commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. May you go wrestling and leaning into your willingness to wrestle. May you go embracing and growing humility. May you go with peace, love, and justice, living love ever more fully and fiercely into this world. Amen. Blessed, blessed be. But yeah, you even figured out that Aubie's name is Aubie.
It was a guess.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
thank you.